Every game needs a strong cast of bosses. It's just a scientific fact. Well, mostly. But when it comes to Resident Evil at least, this is a given. From the main antagonists all the way down to the mindless creatures. Each entry in Capcom's franchise has a wide array of them, and Village is no different. Unlike any other entry in the storied franchise, Capcom have gone out of its way to create a colourful cast that the player has to fight as they take on the role of a desperate father, Ethan Winters. So, how do they all stack up? Are the side bosses worth your time, or are they totally skippable? And which of the four lords come out on top? With that being said, I'm Ben Roy from WhatCulture.com, and this is every Resident Evil Village boss, ranked from worst to best. Number 12, Uriah Strack. Not to be confused with the superior El Gigante from Resident Evil 4, Uriah Strack is much more of a pushover in Resident Evil Village. Sure, it might resemble a cave troll, but it's just much smaller than El Gigante, and the giant axe it holds doesn't really compensate. How to beat? Though this creature might seem terrifying at first, it's really easy to cheese. Players could fight this thing fair, but for the most part just leave the combat area and it will reset. Either going out of a door or stepping out the ceremony site, Uriah Strack is, well, crap. Number 11, Vaclav Alpha. More wolf than man, this creature is the result of someone adapting to the mold a little too well. Coming out of nowhere midway through the village, Ethan is attacked by the smaller variant of these, but they can be quickly shooed off, though it's when he comes across the Alpha that things get messy, even though it's a carbon copy of the smaller variant. How to beat? Located in the fields outside of Louise's house, it wanders around with spears and other weapons sticking out of it. Also covered in blood, it proves that the Alpha is nothing to mess with. And that would be true if you couldn't just cheese this one too. Yes, just like Drac, you can go through a doorway or leave the area and the boss resets. Just poke your head out every once in a while and shoot it and you'll be fine. Even the extra HP this thing has doesn't help it. Number 10, Urias. Resembling that of Dr. Salvatore, Urias hunts down Ethan Winters in the early parts of the game as he stumbles upon the titular village, and just like Leon S. Kennedy, Ethan has to run from house to house to try not be torn to pieces, though it's once he takes out a few lichens that Urias shows its face. Early on there were theories that this was Heisenberg transformed, but they obviously aren't true, even though they both do like wielding hammers. How to beat? Well, on the first encounter with the Urias, you've got to run away from it just like Dr. Salvatore. You could shoot it, but it's going to take a bunch of ammo, and the reward might not be worth it in the early stages. Later on, running just isn't an option. Deep inside the Lycan stronghold, the player is pitted against this beast in a tiny arena. With only a few pillars for cover, the player will have to take this down as fast as they can, because this beast has a tendency to summon other Lycans, and it can get cramped real quick. Aiming for the head is the best bet, as this thing has no real other weakness. Though just be careful of the pillars in the later stages, as they'll be turned into weapons against the player. Number 9, Strum. In the final hours of Resident Evil Village, Ethan finds himself in Heisenberg's factory. After a little chat with Heisenberg, it turns out he's creating an army of his own to fight Mother Miranda, and along the way, just like Mother Miranda, he had a lot of rejects, with the most notable of them all being called Strum, which was a towering figure with a turboprop plane engine as a face. At first, this thing worked wonders for Heisenberg, as it was invulnerable from frontal attacks, but after it clumsily cut its arms off with a propeller, Heisenberg considered this one a failure. How to beat? When first being confronted by Strum, the only thing the player can do is run, because thanks to the propellers on the front, this thing is invulnerable. Later on when fighting it in the smaller room, the trick here is to get behind it as well. Like with many other Resident Evil bosses, you've got to go for the shiny orange bit, and frankly this is the only way to take this thing down. One tip when fighting this thing though, don't let it destroy all the walls so fast, as they'll be blocking the flame attack later on as it starts to die. Number 8, Demitresque daughters. Bella, Daniela and Cassandra are made from anything but sugar, spice and anything nice. Created by Dimitresque back in the 1950s, they've got similar traits to their surrogate mother, but don't come anywhere near to the same power level as her. The three ladies were infected by mutant bugs of an unknown species. After they were infected, these bugs crawled over the ladies' bodies and basically became them. Sort of like the leech zombies from Resident Evil 0, they could split apart and come back together like a humanoid. But unlike the leeches, they were extremely susceptible to cold. How to beat? Before being exposed to the cold outside, these three women are basically invulnerable, with only a few weapons being able to stun them for a minor few seconds. Though after Cassandra corners Ethan and they accidentally break a window, we find out just how to beat them. And no, it isn't sunlight like you'd think, and once being exposed to the cold, they can be wiped out rather quick. Number 7, Uriah Stradger, the bigger, badder and simply put stronger brother of the Uriahs? It is no joke. Ethan Winters was lucky he didn't have to face this medieval looking monster, covered in more armour and wielding a giant spiked mace. This beast was the last line of defence for Mother Miranda's lab, and surely no human would be able to take this on. Well, no human that hadn't already punched boulders around volcanoes. How to beat. Unlike its smaller brother, this one has a massive weak spot on the back, which is easily spotted thanks to its tentacles. But the arena that the player has to fight this in is much smaller than the last one. Seriously, there's not really much room to swing well, a giant spiked mace. Thankfully, Chris Redfield can take a bunch more hits and has heavier weapons. And there are really two options to fight this thing here. Either rely on the airstrike from above, or keep running behind the thing and shooting it in the back. Either way, keep moving, that way you'll avoid the bigger attacks. Number 6. Salvatore Moreau, the runt of the litter when it comes to Mother Miranda's lords. Not much is known about Moreau, but one thing is clear, that after all the experiments she did on this creature, he not only wasn't a suitable vessel for Ava, but he's been left the least human of the lot. Coming out as quite pathetic in his initial form, he almost deserves some sympathy from Ethan, but when we all remember this lord possesses part of his daughter, well, that goes out the window. How to beat. Once Salvatore transforms into a giant fish-like frog thing, he looks quite formidable, but even once this has taken place, he doesn't pose much of a threat. After avoiding him in the deep water sections, the player will be confronted by this Lovecraftian beast in part of the drowned village, and this might be the largest boss arena in the game. Breaking down his walls of goo and just rushing him is really the way to go here. What's left of the human form in the creature's mouth is the weak spot, so go for that, and a couple of well-placed magnum shots will put this thing down quick. Number 5. Mother Miranda. The ringleader of the Four Lords, the ruler of the village, and the genesis of all evil in Resident Evil, Mother Miranda is shrouded within mystery for most of the game. That is up until the final hours when she shows her face to Ethan, and Chris finds her lab. After losing her daughter Ava to the Spanish flu over 100 years ago, Miranda has been working tirelessly to try and bring her back from the dead. And this is only made possible thanks to the Megamycete and her creation of the Cardo parasite. Along the way, she created the Four Lords and the E-type mold with the connections, the shadowy crime syndicate that Mia once worked for. This of course led to the Bakers being infected, Mia being infected, and well, Ethan being infected. How to beat. Once the real fight takes place and Mother Miranda has gone full anime, the best thing to do is shoot her in the face. Well, as best you can until she starts flying around and disappearing. One thing to watch out for is the energy balls that she casts. These seemingly come out of nowhere, but can be stopped with a well-placed bullet. The trick here is to stock up with ammo, because even on the lower difficulties, she's a real bullet sponge. Number 4. Baby. The stuff of nightmares, this humongous unborn baby fetus technically isn't even real. It's just all an illusion. Formed from the pollen created by Donna Benitez after Ethan inhales it. So yeah, this is all actually in his own head. Obviously babies are at the forefront of his mind because he's trying to save his daughter Rose. So this is where Benitez's pollen plays into great effect. Now that being said, the baby can devour Ethan, catching him and saying yummy before doing so. But as it isn't real, there's a mystery to how Ethan actually dies. Maybe Ethan chokes himself or even has a heart attack. We just don't know. But what is clear, this section out PT's PT to a certain extent. Once Donna Benitez is killed, the creature essentially vanishes, and well, ceases to exist. How to beat? You don't, you just run. Number 3. Donna Benitez. One of the more unfortunate lords, Donna Benitez was kidnapped at an early age by Mother Miranda and experimented on with the Cardo parasite relentlessly. As a result of the testing, she was left with significant mental illnesses and would hide herself away, almost living through her puppet, Angie. She could also divide herself up into multiple puppets, controlling them all at once, while staying hidden. And this is thanks to the pollen that she releases, which really gets into her victims' minds and plays tricks on them. How to beat? Well, if anyone's lucky to escape the baby down in the basement, they'll have to play an elaborate game of hide and seek. The first hiding spot is always the same, upstairs in the bedroom, and after that there's only a few places Angie can be. So really all the player can do is be quick on their feet and find Angie 2 more times. And luckily, she stands out against the other dolls. Number 2. Karl Heisenberg. Heisenberg was almost a perfect fit for Eva. Though pretty much like all her experiments, he just didn't quite fit. But as a result of all this, he gained the ability to control metal, much like Marvel's Magneto. However, deep down, this left him feeling as she stole his body and his dignity. For much of the game, Heisenberg would hide his resentment, but once he finally got Ethan to himself, he would try and turn him to his side. All this while constructing an army of his own. Karl wanted to use the power of Rose against Miranda, but Ethan just wouldn't let him. How to beat? Coming out of nowhere, this fight with Heisenberg feels like Robot Wars and Twisted Metal had a baby. Because thanks to Heisenberg transforming into a giant mechanical monster, Ethan needs a little help in this fight and pilot what feels like a forklift with attitude. But in classic Resident Evil fashion, yet again, this fight boils down to shooting the orange glowy thing over and over again. So just keep your distance, utilize the grenade launcher, and you'll be fine. Number 1. Lady Dimitrescu. One of the 4 lords of the region, this experiment wasn't quite a failure, and far from a lichen, Lady Dimitrescu is basically the face of this game. And it kinda helps that Ethan doesn't really have a face. Lady D was so close to becoming a perfect vessel for Miranda's daughter, but thanks to a hereditary blood disease, she didn't work out. Though thanks to this, she took on vampiric qualities, and played off this for over 50 years until she met her demise at the hands of Ethan. How to beat? Well, when Lady Dimitrescu is in full Mr. X mode, you can't really hurt her. It's once she transforms that the fight really begins. And in this case, it's very similar to Moreau. Shoot what's left of her old body, and you're done. And sure, this isn't a glowy orange thing, but it's quite similar. And once she's flying around, it doesn't really feel like much of a challenge either. Just be sure to avoid those bugs she lets out once in a while, and you're all good. It's really a shame that Lady D didn't stick around longer. And that's my list. That's every Resident Evil Village boss ranked from worst to best. What do you think? Do you agree with the ranking? Or do you think someone else should have been at the top? Maybe Heisenberg? Let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I've been Ben Roy Turner, and you can follow me at Ben Roy Turner, and follow us all at WCulture Gaming. And until next time, no more games.